The opinions, viewpoints, and beliefs presented on this program do not necessarily reflect those of the management, the affiliates and broadcast partners, or the sponsors. Listener discretion is advised. Between science and ignorance, there is filler.
And good evening, everyone. Welcome to Paranormal Filler. I am your host, Wes Forsythe. The original broadcast date is September 4th, 2016. Of course, I will remind you that every week, Paranormal Filler is brought to you by Ken Boggle's House of Cards, tarotbyken.com. Got a lot of stuff on the calendar. Of course, my guest tonight is a friend of mine, Russ Stiver. I think we've got a real interesting story to tell the listeners, and to in the process of Russ and I catching up, you're going to learn a lot about my own psychic metaphysical background. The of course, now everybody, the Farrar event with Elizabeth Saint coming up next weekend. Still plenty of spaces left. We're actually, after a off to a decent start, we're a little behind the curve. I mean, this is going to be an intimate event, people. So if you were kind of on the fence because you don't like big events, doesn't look like this one is going to be it. This is going to be a chance to be up close and personal with one of your favorite paranormal television stars, and me and Coyote Chris Sutton. Also, Chris and I will be doing the Valley's Mines event in October 15th. All that, you can find more about it on paranormalfiller.com. Just click the links there. Don't forget Scarefest coming up the end of this month, September 30th through October 2nd. And although it is not listed on the Scarefest website, I am doing a presentation. I will be giving you a nice generic overview of getting your ass on the internet and doing internet radio, podcasting, whatever you want to call it. But I'm doing an all around, so it's not just paranormal, it's not just horror. It's, if you want it, it's called internet radio sharing your passion. They didn't put me on the speaker page because that would have, it took me 10 months to get one damn banner, people. The chances of them doing me a speaker banner also slim to none. So anyway, but I'm on the star page, so I'm good because, as everyone knows, I'm not actually a star. But that's all coming up, so stay tuned. We've got a good show. Russ, welcome finally to Paranormal Filler.
Thank you so much, Wes, for having me. I really appreciate it. Finally, it's about time to get on the show.
Okay, first I'm going to give the background on getting him as a guest. I talked to Russ. We caught up a little bit at Scarefest last year, so almost a year ago. And
almost a year ago.
And came back, and I don't know, I've got the normal stuff that happens after Scarefest, and by the time I got around to contacting Russ, he had dropped off once again off the face of social media. Nita told me not long ago that Russ Stiver friended me again, and so I said I need to get him on the show. So we threw it together in a hurry, but I do appreciate you coming on short notice. I thought I'd better go ahead and grab it while the iron's hot, as they say.
Well, I appreciate you having me on, Wes. I mean, yeah, us catching up at Scarefest last year was actually a really good time. I mean, I hadn't seen you since Cardome Center down in, 2013?
Yeah, see, that's the weird thing about you and I. I call Russ a friend. Now, when it gets right down to it, we have less of a friendship and more of a kinship that we will get into. Yes. In background, people that listen to the show regularly have heard me talk about my own psychic, metaphysical, spiritual transition from where I went to a very, very technical operator with my blinky light devices and such, and embraced and moved into the metaphysical side of the field. This was all centered around this one investigation that Russ and I were part of. That's really, I consider that the seminal event, the night that changed my outlook. And
that was the night that changed everybody's outlook. It was Chris Dedman put together a fantastic event. I mean, it was one of those things where it just changed everybody's outlook on everything. I mean, we had the great Miss Jenny Stewart down there. I mean, it was a fantastic event that he put together.
But yeah, and it's hard to describe this. I have never encountered a place that felt more spiritually powerful. Now, I've encountered places where I've been able to record more activity. I've been to places where I've actually had more experiences, but there was something in the air that night, something about the environment that just, it hit you from top to bottom. Would you agree?
Oh, I would completely agree. I mean, it was one of those things where, I mean, for those of you that are not familiar with the Cardome Center, it was actually an old nunnery, is what they would formally call it. It was something that was very, I wouldn't say heavy, but something that was very emotional almost. I mean, it was something that you could feel just walking through these walls and these halls and the corridors of these buildings that you could not chalk up to anything else you've ever walked through.
Absolutely. And now we'll get back to that, but then the other interesting thing about Russ and I both is after that night, we took very, very similar paths, including podcasting or internet radio or
yes.
whatever you want to call it. So not only did we have a spiritual awakening that was triggered that night, we both, I mean, career path wise, as far as you can call this a career, we went in very similar directions. And so I would, I followed Russ until, and this is what we'll get into, everyone, until, I guess the way to put it would be things got to him, and he kind of dropped off. And because I was a little bit jealous because I was still doing an independent podcast, Russ, and you jumped right on up to Paramania Radio, and so I mean, so in other words, he leapfrogged me in a couple of, actually several different areas, but anyway, let's get started with
sure.
Up until that night, talking to you and your group was very impressive, by the way. You all had assembled a brain fest. Very smart people, very technically oriented. And I got the impression that up until that night, although you were interested in the metaphysical side of the paranormal, you also did not embrace it.
I did not, correct.
So, but like I said, very, very competent group. Now, we did this event. Russ is one of the few people I've been on an investigation with that was a bigger smartass than me. And it really showed that night, that one night. But we basically we like Russ said, there were some events that were big to me, and I don't know if the same events that night. What stood out to you most, Russ, about the place as far as personally? What really brought your spiritual, made you start going in that direction?
Well, Wes, from what, it's a very interesting story for myself. About a couple months before, or about a year before, I went on this event down at Cardome in 2013. My grandmother had passed away. And I was actually on a way to an investigation when she did pass away. And the place I was going on to an investigation was Bobby Mackey's Music House. Or Bobby Mackey's Music World, excuse me. And literally, as soon as we crossed the Kentucky line from Ohio, I got a call from my father telling me that my grandmother had passed away. And investigating has always been something that's been very important to me. That has always really kept me grounded, I guess you could say. That night, I ended up picking up an attachment because, as you know, going into an investigation, very clouded, very distracted, very emotionally compromised, can allow a lot of things to pick up on you. And Bobby Mackey's is one of those places that people will wait years to investigate. It is one of the hotspots of America. It is one of the greatest places you can investigate ever. And even knowing what just had happened, I wasn't going to pass this opportunity up. So I ended up having an attachment jump on me that night. It has been confirmed by 2 different mediums that is exactly where I got my attachment from. I ended up getting in contact with Jenny Stewart, who is an amazing medium. Amazing. She has actually guided me and actually has helped me through my mediumship and my teachings and whatnot. So that night at Cardome, when I met her, we had talked on and off on Facebook and on the phone and everything like that, and she ended up pulling an attachment off me that night at Cardome that opened up everything for me. It literally opened up my entire metaphysical world to the point where it was hard to control. It really honestly was. And even to this day, she tells me that it's one of the worst attachments she has ever pulled off anybody. And I still to this day have a utmost gratefulness and respect for her for doing what she did to me, because she opened up my eyes to what I actually had. I mean, I just realized that it's one of those things where there's more out there than just what you can catch on a recorder or on a spirit box or a ghost box or on an EMF detector or whatever. I mean, it's one of those things where it was an amazing experience for me because it opened up my eyes so much, but also it really opened up the eyes of the group that I was with because of seeing what can happen, seeing what can change.
Now, to catch everybody up, now my progress along this line, this is where we intersected. But up until that point, now I'd been to Bobby Mackey's, and I'd been to the different places that people talk about, and then when I got to Cardome, there was now if I remember the story, she did that the first night before you all actually spent the night. Do I remember that correctly? She actually did that pretty much when you all got there or something.
It was the first night, correct, yes.
I had a different feeling going in. My thing was, I was seeing people like you. Now, of course, I remember you all talking about that. Then I saw what happened at Cardome. And I'd seen it all along my investigative journey that this stuff was happening to other people. And I consider myself as weak and frail and as mentally incompetent or whatever. In other words, I've got my emotional baggage is what I'm saying. And, now about the only thing I never did, I always had this hard and fast rule that I wouldn't go into investigation if I was actually sick. But I'm a terribly healthy person, so it's never even come up. But my question going into it was, why isn't this happening to me? So I guess at that night, it kind of like, why did it happen to you? And at that intersection for me was, why isn't it happening? And while I wasn't there for when she worked with you, I was there. The young lady that was with your group, that the general consensus was that she brought something in with her, and this place just absolutely triggered it. Is that pretty accurate?
It's not.
Okay.
Actually, Natalie, who was an investigator on my team for Collective Paranormal Research Society out of Youngstown, her, Jenny, and a couple other investigators were doing a ghost box session down in one of the basement areas.
Right.
And out of nowhere, the ghost box jumps out and says, attachment. And Jenny immediately asks, is somebody here going to get an attachment or has an attachment? And I can't remember what it responded with. I wasn't with the group at the time. I was at a different place. But from my understanding of it, something jumped onto one of the investigators that night and would have created a lot of havoc if it wasn't pulling off that night.
Okay, I guess my confusion was, I guess a good way to put it would be that she went into it, though, with, we'll call it spiritual weakness. Everybody has it.
Yes.
But in other words, there were areas of her life that people knew about that, in other words, she was not armored up. She was not wearing the armor of God, or however you want to put it. So she was vulnerable. But
correct.
See, when this happened, everyone, she was she kind of because her Russ, your group was so technically oriented. They all went their different directions, and it was like, I'm all business. I've got this meter, and we're doing this camera. And in other words, she felt, I don't want to say she felt left out, but she didn't have a job. So anyway, she followed along with me because I was doing spirit dowsing and some other borderline metaphysical stuff. But
and she had an amazing experience with you and I can't remember his name off the top of my head. Father Patamu, I want to say.
Oh, Frater. Anyway, Georgetown Paranormal.
She went with you to do the dowsing rods and everything like that, and she had an amazing experience with you guys.
Yeah. We were upstairs. I've talked about it on there, but I don't like I said, I'm trying desperately not to spend all this episode talking about me. But yeah, we were having a great time, and like I said, the activity spiritually was just, and experience wise, was just off the charts. But then I was downstairs when this hit her, and so when it hit her, that's when all these images started flashing and questions started flashing through my mind. Wait a minute, why did it, she's been tagging along with me all weekend. Why would this thing, attack her versus me? I'm just as weak and vulnerable as the next person. So that was the intersection. But it was an emotional event. But now in my particular case, what happened to me that night was these images that were flashing through my mind. I guess you could say, Russ, they were saying, well, like the whole time Jenny was doing her thing and with Natalie,
yep,
these messages were going through my mind. Get in on this. Lay your hand on her. Do, all this stuff I'm saying, and I'm like, where is this coming from? This is not me. I don't even believe in this stuff, as far as, these attacks and everything. And, so anyway, so that brings everybody up to speed. It was a really emotional night. That there was an energy in that place that was palpable. I don't think anybody.
It was like none other.
Now, so that opened you up. Now, see, okay, now here's where I got actually when I was following Russ in the early days, I actually got a little jealous. Because here's this guy that
you can't get jealous of me, Wes. Come on.
Well, I did, because once I started exploring the metaphysical world, people were telling me I had these gifts, but I could not access what they were telling me I was able to do. I had a medium that I saw right after that said, I can tell you, if you get a message in your mind, don't listen to anybody else. If you're talking to a medium and something tells you they're wrong, she says they're wrong. That's how cued in. But at the same time, I can't see ghosts. And then Russ, like I said, that night we were on the same level technically and the way we went about things. And then I start listening to Russ, and now I'll let you take the story over. this just absolutely flooded your life because mine was on a dimmer switch. Apparently, you flipped the switch on. So tell everybody after that what you started to experience.
Well, after Cardome, literally there was a huge flood of different things that came in. It really did change my life for the better. I would hope, at least. It was one of those things where I started looking more and more into the metaphysical side of things. I started looking more into the mediumship side of things. It's one of those things where my team that I was with, Collective Paranormal Research Society at the time, completely supported me on, and they really stood behind me, and they were amazing with what I did. About 2 months after the Cardome Center, I did an investigation at a location that is very near and dear to my heart called Madison Seminary, which is in Madison, Ohio, and I actually ended up actually there's somebody in the chat room right now, Audrey, that was with me that night, and she can contest for it and prove it, that I walked into a room, and this was after I opened myself up to knowing what I was able to do and what I could do. I walked into a room. There was 4 of us in the room. Actually, I remember it clear as day. It was Audrey, Fran, Frankie, and myself. I walked into the room. I've been to this place hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of times before. I've cleaned this place. I've scrubbed the floors. I've swept. I've done everything to this location. And I walked in, and I immediately collapsed my knees and started crying. Out of nowhere. Just started crying. They were running recorders the entire time. And I was literally having a conversation with someone that you couldn't hear on the other side. But I could hear her, and out of nowhere, I just stood up and I was like, all right, it's time to go. It's time to go. We ended up walking out of the building, and they were still running recorders the entire time we were walking out of the building. And as soon as we hit the threshold from the interior to the exterior of the building, you hear a female just sigh. And it is a very prominent sigh, as a sigh of relief. And as soon as that happened, I snapped out of whatever mode I was in, whatever you want to call it, and I talked to Jenny, who was my mentor at that point, and she told me that I literally crossed somebody over that night. I had never done it before. I've never experienced it before. I don't have experience in doing that, but it was one of those things where you walk into a location and you feel that something's wanting to talk to you. Mm-hmm. Something's wanting to speak to you. Something is wanting to connect with you. And you can't help yourself but to try to help that person.
See, now I experienced that on a much more murky level. I did learn with the help of some psychic friends, and a lot of it is instinctual. But after Cardome, I did learn to use, and the way I look at it, I'm using my light amongst the living to show the deceased the way out. My theory on it is it's not that the light isn't there for them; it's they lose it. So I guess you could say I feel like I combine my light that I carry with me to act as a guidepost, and then now it gets more complicated when they don't want to leave, of course. But
it does get more complicated because the unfortunate part about it is as a light worker, I guess you could call it. Because I don't call myself medium. I'm a healer. I can do energy transfers. I can do attachment removals, things like that. I call myself a light worker, and the problem with it is as a light worker, you have to be very careful because when you're doing crossovers and things like that and attachment removals, you're opening yourself up. And every once in a while, something could jump on you.
Mm-hmm.
So you're taking that risk for the better good of somebody else.
Now that I agree with. My particular gift, for whatever reason, thus far. Now I'm not saying, I've always told everybody I'm not bulletproof, but I do seem to be Teflon coated. I've just been incredibly lucky with the places that I've went in. And for a while, Russ, I mean, before my father passed away, mediums were calling me to handle cases that they didn't want to deal with because of the reasons you just stated. They didn't want to expose themselves. But yeah, it was fine for Wesley because apparently he's Teflon coated. But so anyway,
apparently you can just open yourself up to anything, right?
Apparently, yeah. But honestly, I think now this gets back to the crux of the matter. I think that for whatever reason, I don't, in doing what similar to what you do, I don't open myself up all the way. I think there is some little safety valve, or maybe it's just a good-ass guardian angel that stands with me. But when I do what you just described, I never really feel exposed.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you, if we have time here real quick.
Oh, we got plenty of time.
Break or anything here real quick. I will tell you a story of my first ever attachment removal that I did. And it was actually on my stepsister, Barb, who was actually in the group at the time. And I was living in Columbus at the time. And she called me. It was either the day before or the day after Thanksgiving. And she called me and said that there were some things going on. And I love my nephew to death. His name's actually Christian. And love him to death, and she was telling me that she was having some very, I wouldn't say impure, but I would say very bad thoughts, I guess. Yeah, mm-hmm. That's the only word I can really correlate with this right now. But there was a woman that was on Paranormal Radio called Mama Lisa, and she did her own show on there and everything. And with the help of Jenny Stewart and whatnot, I was able to go to my sister's house, and we had, I believe there were 3 or 4 people over there at the time. And I went up there, and I knew what I had to do. I knew what had to be done. What she had on her was pretty bad, and she picked up from the House of Wills in Cleveland, Ohio, which is an old funeral home, that she actually caught one of the best pieces of evidence that I've ever seen before. Ever. And she was in a very bad place, in a very bad situation. And I had Mama Lisa on the phone with me while I was doing this attachment removal. And it was the first one I ever done. I was unsure of myself. And Mama Lisa kept telling me that you need to be sure of yourself, you need to be confident in yourself, you need to be able to know what you're doing. And there was a certain point in time, there were, like I said, 3 or 4 people in the apartment at the time, and I looked over behind the couch, and there were 2 figures standing there. No one was standing behind the couch at the time. They were all behind me. They were all helping me. And, of course, during an attachment removal, I constantly say the St. Michael prayer. Constantly.
Mm-hmm.
And I look over, and there's 2 figures, and one figure just looked at me and just smiled and nodded, knowing that I was doing what was right, and they were there. After I removed the attachment, I ended up calling and talking to Jenny, who told me that St. Michael was there, and so was St. Peter. So I had 2 archangels looking over me as I was doing this attachment removal. And my stepsister and I still talk about it to this day. It's one of those things that doesn't change. It doesn't go away. It's not something you forget. And being able to be blessed with this gift that I have is something that I'm not going to take for granted. I'm not going to... you know as well as I do with your show you have out there, there are mediums and psychics and things out there that will sell themselves. And that's pretty much what you have to do anymore, is sell yourself. showing that you're this, you're that, you're on the reel on things and whatnot. But I don't do that to myself. That's something I kind of keep to myself, and I know, like, putting it out now there to all your listeners and whatnot. It's I guess kind of the cat's out of the bag.
Well, I think you sound like me. Every time I tell somebody what I know I'm able to do, I feel like I have to put a disclaimer with it. Anywhere from I realize it's my favorite term is metaphysical bullshit. I refer to everything I do as metaphysical bullshit because I've always said maybe I'm just putting on that good of a show. But if I believe it and the person believes it and everything works out, then what's the difference if it's all in our minds?
Exactly.
But yeah, I really do understand that. I don't hang a placard out in the front yard saying Ghostbusters.
Yep.
Just basically it was, one psychic told another psychic and then this, that, and the other. And like I said, for a while there, I was staying fairly busy until now, personally, of course, everybody who listens regularly knows this. When, it's funny, Russ, as armored up as I was, and the way, and my view of death, death is not something that, in other words, it's part of the day job, you might say. But I was so unprepared.
It's not something to be feared.
Right. But I was so unprepared for my father's passing and the emotional impact that it had on me that I did, I had to step away from the field, and I'm really just now getting back into it anywhere near where I was. But I still have trouble meditating, keeping that concentration level. But I really do now. Okay, now this is what I want to get into the mechanics of it.
Sure.
I'm assuming that until Jenny yanked off whatever it was that was clean about you, that up until that point. Well, let me just ask you: did you feel until that night? Did you feel like you had any particular gift or empathy or sensitivity to the paranormal?
No, actually, I honestly did not feel that way. I mean, there were things that were going wrong in my life prior to her pulling this attachment off of me. I didn't know. I chalked it up to bad luck, honestly, because anybody that wasn't into the metaphysical realm of the paranormal, or whatever you'd like to call it, it's something that definitely opens your eyes quite a bit. I didn't think that. Even my dad made a comment, because when we came back from Cardome, myself and Frankie, who is still a near and dear friend to me, I haven't talked to him in quite a while. He had some things go wrong in his life. I had some things go wrong in my life, and we kind of lost contact. They made the comment about, oh, you come back and all of a sudden you have these gifts and abilities and things like that. And you can contest for this yourself, Wes. It takes somebody to show you what abilities you have. It takes somebody to open your eyes and realize that, you know what, I've had these abilities all along, and I haven't taken full grasp of them.
Oh yeah, that part I 100, because I look back now at different things that happened through my life, different visions that I had, dreams. My big claim to fame before that was dreams. I would have a dream, and I mean that dream.
Oh yeah.
It would be about a place that I'd never been, and then finally one day I would walk in there and I'd go, oh my God, the toaster's in the same spot. Everything would be just right. I told people how the actual order they built their house in one circumstance. So, but
oh yeah,
at the time when they happened, it was just, oh wow, that's cool. But it just never even occurred to me that there was anything else going on. And then but the main difference, and this is what I want to get to after the break. But so be thinking about this. The main difference is that the psychics and mediums that do readings on me and dig into my aura and all this stuff, they tell me all this stuff that I'm able to do, and I have yet to be able to even grasp a part of it. versus some of the things that you're talking about. But we're going to get to that. Everybody, we got to do our sponsor break. We'll be right back with more Paranormal Filler and my guest, Russ Stiver.
Hello, friends. Are you exhausted with life? Resent your children? Maybe your husband is cheating on you. Get yourself a tarot reading with Ken Boggle. He can provide you with the clarity, guidance, and answers you need. That's tarotbyken.com. He makes things seem less shitty. Every Friday night, Scarefest Radio.
Dude, run!
Join us every week as your hosts go behind the scenes of America's premier horror and paranormal convention, the Scarefest.
Here's Johnny.
You will be hearing from celebrities, speakers, artists, entertainers, and some of the most unique vendors anywhere.
I am your father.
Every week we will be giving away a 3-day pass to a lucky listener.
I'm afraid.
That's the Scarefest Radio. Friday nights at 9 p.m. Eastern on ScarefestRadio.com.
And we're back with more Paranormal Filler. My guest is Russ Stivers. Stiver, singular. The, I'm surprised I haven't screwed that up before. The, same launching point there. Now, after the attachment was removed from you, I understand that you say things opened up for you after that. But I mean,
Yes.
Did Jenny or any of the other because maybe that's what I need. Maybe because I haven't had any attachments, maybe somebody just needs to come in and rip my aura apart. You started telling these stories that I heard on the radio about all of a sudden you were seeing things. Of course, you gave us the one story, but I mean, you were regularly, if not able to do it when you wanted to, you were seeing things that you didn't see before.
Correct. It's one of those things where it's hard to describe because the simple fact of it is it was so new to me, and I was going through before the attachment was even removed from me, and I've always been the type of person that even on investigations I'm open to everything. I'm not going to be proven wrong unless I'm shown wrong, plain and simple. And there was a point in time before, I want to say 2 or 3 weeks before I went down in October to the Cardome Center event, that I was at my house, my apartment in Youngstown, Ohio, and there were a lot of things that were going wrong for me, and there were a lot of things that weren't going the way I wanted them to go, like everybody does in their life. And I went upstairs to go to bed. I lived in a townhouse. It was a 2-bedroom townhouse, so there's a top floor and a bottom floor. And I walked in my bedroom, and I always kept the light off because, of course, you know, it's not a stereotype. I like the dark. I prefer to be in the dark. No pun intended. But it was one of those things where I walked into my bedroom. The light was shining through on the street light through my window. And it was late September, early October, and a shadow moved across my wall. And I didn't think anything of it. Flipped on the switch real quick, looked around, nothing was there, you know, whatever. So I flipped on the switch again, laid down in bed. And I was laying there, and I was thinking about everything that was going wrong in my life. I was thinking about everything that was terrible at that point. And nothing went right. Nothing was going right. And I remember feeling something pushed down on the end of my bed. And I was rolled over on my side, blanket was up towards my face and everything, and I looked down, and it's my grandmother, who had passed away, was sitting there at the end of my bed. And she just kind of looked at me and nodded and kind of smiled. and then just disappeared. The bed rose back up. There was no pressure on the bed, anything. I knew at that point that everything was going to be all right, because my grandmother has always been that guiding force for me. She's always been the one that has really guided me along my way. And to know that she was still there with me, and it gave me that nod of approval, and knowing that everything was going to be all right, that was something to me that I guess kind of opened me up a little bit more, knowing that, you know what, regardless of what happens, everything is going to be all right. And I think everybody out there needs that nod of approval, that needs that affirmation that everything will be all right. Whether it be from somebody that's still living, somebody that's passed, whatever it may be. But I think all in life, that's what you're looking for, is somebody to tell you that this is what you're doing, it's good, you know how to do it.
Now, I agree with that. Now, I've not been fortunate enough to get any messages from beyond. But my general go-to question when I'm talking to psychics is I want to know, is the path that I'm on the path that I'm supposed to be on? Because I believe in destiny. I talked about this with somebody a few weeks back. I believe in destiny. To a great degree, I believe in fate. But I also believe that, being the chaotic human that I am, I have the innate ability to completely miss my destiny, to veer off, to, fate might bring me to a point, but then it's up to me to either pursue the right direction or take my life in a completely, other direction.
Well, Wes, honestly, there's never a wrong way for destiny, honestly, because you'll end up in the same way every single time. What you need to do is a life lesson, and regardless of what road you go down, you're still going to end up in the same place. I believe that life teaches us lessons that we need to learn until we can move on to the next one.
Mm-hmm. Now, that I agree with 100%.
Everything that's thrown at us wouldn't be thrown at us unless we could handle it. God gives his greatest battles to his strongest soldiers.
Yeah, but sometimes I feel like I'm peeling potatoes in God's army.
What's that?
Sometimes I feel like I'm in God's army and I'm the guy peeling potatoes. When I should be on the battlefield.
I could tell you, I've gone through a pretty hard time in my life as of recent as well. And anybody that's listening out there, anybody that listens to the archive, whatever it may be, I guess I could tell you that keep trucking through. I mean, you're on this path for a reason. God wouldn't have put you on this path for a reason unless he knew you could handle it. And there's a lot of people out there that have gone through a lot of hard things, a lot harder than I've gone through. But I know if anybody can do it, I didn't think that I could do it, but I did. I'm still standing. I'm here today. I'm telling you my story today. And I can honestly contest that it's one of those things where you keep your head down, you keep pushing forward, and you'll be perfectly fine.
When nowadays, now that you've explored your gifts and realized at least a portion of them, when you go into pick whatever haunted location you want, how do you experience it now? I mean, how you said you won't call yourself a medium, but what generally do you expect if a place is haunted?
Honestly, I never expect anything, because as soon as you go in expecting something into a location, you're going to be let down, because you should never expect anything that you can't pick up yourself. I open myself up enough to be able to experience what the location has to offer.
Mm-hmm.
I don't try to open myself up because, one, that's dangerous, because something could jump onto you, something could latch onto you. Jenny Stewart, the amazing woman she is, has affectionately called attachments hitchhikers, and that's exactly what they are. And I try not to open myself up too much. I carry stones with me. I carry my St. Michael medal with me at all times, as well as a cross. that I wear on every investigation I go on. If the case calls for it, I will open myself up. I don't like to do it, especially with a location that I'm not familiar with, but there are certain places that I will open myself up with a little bit, just so I can help whoever's there, whoever's stuck there, whatever can be there. And like
I guess the way I should have phrased the question, I guess really it sounds like you've learned to use the dimmer switch. I have. But I guess the question would be, how does a ghost get in touch with you? I mean,
how do they get in touch with me?
Yeah, if you go into a spot, let's be more specific on the situation. Somebody calls you for help. They think their house is haunted.
Sure,
stuff's bugging them. And I'm not talking about your evil mean spirit. I mean, just your average run of the mill lost soul that doesn't. Well, they seem to all become assholes just because it's like a kid
just
with,
because they can.
It's like a kid with firecrackers. You know,
yes.
they don't know what they're really doing. If you what do you sense? What do you how do you know if, I'll put it this way, if you go into a house, how do you know if the house is haunted? What do you feel? Because somewhere, I never know when my bullshit meter is kicking off versus when I'm really experiencing something.
Honestly, Wes, I honestly don't use my abilities that much on investigations. I still trust myself. I am the type of person that the best tool you can have is yourself. It's not going to be an EVP recorder. It's not going to be an EMF detector. It's not going to be a ghost box. It's not going to be anything. Your best tool on an investigation is yourself. Plain and simple. Because you get a cold spot. You hear something. No one else is going to be able to dispute that except for yourself. And if you hear it, you feel it, you see it, that's all you need as an investigator. That's honestly all you need. For residential investigations and things like that, you have to be a little more fine-toothed. You have to be a little more honed in on what is going on at that location. 9 times out of 10, when I go into a residential investigation, I can debunk everything that's going on that they say. There has been one investigation that I have been on that I have not been able to debunk. Most of the time, it's bad wiring in the house is creating a fear case from high EMF. That's going to cause paranoia. It's going to cause hallucination. That's going to cause everything. Everybody out there that's in the paranormal field knows what a fear cage is. And it's one of those things where I don't try to open myself up. I don't try to say, I don't go into a location going, I'm a medium. I can see this. I can hear this. I can do this. What I do on an investigation, I guess you could say, is I'll open myself up just enough to get hints on where there might be activity, where something might be, things like that. I'm not going to open myself up and do a full communication. I was actually up in Boston a couple years back. One of the girls in the chat room, Nicole, right now, Coley, actually in the chat room, she was with us, and I was up on an investigation at the USS Salem, and there was something that was drawing us towards the captain's quarters, up in the top of the ship, from everywhere. And it was, for some reason, just pulling me there. Just absolutely pulling me there. And I don't know why. So there was a group of us that went up there, and we were running a ghost box session. And at the point the USS Salem was actually in commission, there was no women allowed on the ship. And at this point where the USS Salem was actually commissioned, it was still during the times of segregation and things like that. And we were doing a ghost box session, and for some reason, the ghost box would only talk to me. I don't know why. It would only talk to me. And 3 of the girls were sitting on the bench, and the bench actually folded out into a bed. It had like one of the plastic like fold-up beds on it. And out of nowhere, the ghost box says, female. And it's like, okay, yes, there's females on the ship right now. Does that bother you? And one of the women that actually was with us was actually a mixed female. And I asked that, do you not like women on your ship? And out of nowhere, James DePaul, who was Rachel Hoffman, who is PXP, Rachel and Tina from PXP, they were on, I can't remember the name of the show, Zach Bagans, it was, I can't remember, it's not important, but all of a sudden the mattress on the back came forward, hit them all in the back, and said a very derogatory term, which I'm pretty sure everybody can figure out from what I'm getting at. And it was one of those things where as soon as that happened, I could tell the energy in the room changed, and it was time to get out. But whatever led me to those captain's quarters, I don't know what did. I don't know what it was, but something up there told me there was something there.
Mm-hmm.
And on an investigation, you have to go with your gut feeling. If something's telling you to run, run. If something's telling you to stay there, stay. After 16 years now, I guess you could say, I'm 32 years old now. I started when I was 15 years old at Mansfield Reformatory, OSR, Shawshank Redemption Prison, whoever doesn't know. That was my first ever investigation I went on. And it was one of those things where if it's telling you to stay, stay. Something's going to happen. If it's telling you to go, it's telling you to go for a reason.
Now, one more thing I want to know about the experience. Okay, now you mentioned about removing spiritual attachments.
Mm-hmm.
Is this something that do you sense? Do you feel? Is it a visual experience to you? Is it a mental experience? How do you know someone actually has an attachment?
There's a different feeling to them. For myself, I know when something latches onto me. Not so much because I actually need some work done to myself right now, and I will admit that. But it's one of those things where mannerisms will change. If you know a person, mannerisms will change. Things will happen that you don't realize that the person that has the attachment or whatever doesn't realize that that's something that's unordinary for them. But somebody that knows that person well, I know Nicole can contest for this. She was on the USS Salem the night I pulled an attachment off somebody, and actually we have a picture of it. And it actually looks like ectoplasm being pulled out of this kid's neck. And the kid was actually, I want to say 13, 14 years old. And USS Salem uses the ship for the Boy Scouts to do their training on and things like that. And normally when you do an attachment, you want to be alone with the person. You want to be out of harm's way and out of sight's way, I guess you could say. But this certain case, he was not able to wait. It was one of those things where, and I'm not calling myself an experienced medium. I'm not calling myself an experienced, attachment removal person, whatever. But it was one of those things that I knew I had the ability to do. And if I have the ability to do it, I'm going to do it.
Mm-hmm.
You can't let somebody sit there and, I don't want to use the word suffer, but you can't let them sit there and go through that. Because you can see it, you can see the mannerism change, you can see everything change. And I knew at that point, and Nicole in the chat room can actually contest for it because she was there when it happened. We actually have video and picture of it, of me pulling something off this little kid. And I don't want to call him little, he was a teenager, but, it's one of those things that I'm not, I guess it comes down to confidence, but you have to be confident in yourself to be able to do what you're set out to do.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a lot of people's problems, is they're not confident. And I had that biggest issue for a while for myself. I wasn't confident in my abilities and my gift that I had. But talking to several different mediums and Reiki workers and things like that, they were able to guide me on the right direction of, this is what you're meant to do. This is what you do. And, you know, since then, thankfully, I haven't run into any of those issues, but I have the ability to do it. I just don't broadcast it.
Right. You know, that I 100% understand. Do you, okay, now even with the dimmer switch, now do you still ever get, I want to say, bothered at home? Say, now one thing instinctually, even before I was even into the metaphysical, when I got into ghost hunting in general, I mentally, and looking back on it, I armored my home, you might say, but it was basically, I established my house, and it wasn't through prayer, and it was just through intent. My house was a no ghost zone. I didn't say prayers when I went into an investigation. About the only thing I said when I would leave, I generally do say, well, thank you for having me. I'm going home now. I don't care what you do, but you can't go with me. But by setting up those boundaries, and I will not use my paranormal equipment in the house. The one time I used a piece of paranormal equipment, I had an Ovilus, and I was just wanting to make sure the batteries worked. And I set it down under a lamp so I could read the plate, hit the button, and it says lamp. And I said, fuck. And pardon the expression, everybody, but that's the way it went. And I dropped it, and I said, nope. That's why I don't use paranormal equipment in my house. So, and as far as I know, the walls have only been breached twice. And neither one was, overly. One went out of her way. She came with the place, and she went out of her way to stay away from me. And I had to actually look for her. And the other one, I mean, I felt him come into the house, and I mentally told him, said, "This ain't the place you want to be," and he left. And but as deep as I am into it, as big of a believer as I am, I've been able to keep the homestead, and mediums have attested to this that have come in, reasonably paranormal free. Do you do anything? Do you have that problem? Or with the dimmer switch, do you just not worry about who's there?
No, actually, when I moved into my new house that I'm in, first thing I did before I had any furniture at all in here, I came in, I laid salt around all the windows, all the door frames, everything. I cleansed it. I did a saging, and because I have a 4-year-old daughter, and anybody out there that's listening that has kids or knows things about that, kids are innocent and pure. They can see things like they're crazy. So when my daughter says that she saw somebody or talked to somebody or whatever, I don't chalk it up to an imaginary friend. I go full on out like, hey, what's here? Who's here? Who are you? Da-da-da-da, whatever. And it's one of those things where I've protected my home, and I don't let anything in. Every investigation I do, I cleanse myself afterwards. I go out to a tree. I ground myself. I put all the negative energy out. I put everything out that has picked up on me during the investigation. And I come home immediately, and the first thing I do after an investigation, come home and shower. And it's one of those things that you come home and shower, you cleanse. Because regardless if you cleanse in a tree and recycle your energy and ground yourself, you still need to shower when you get home with sea salt. And there's a couple other things you can use out there. I constantly do that every time. And that's something that I firmly believe that has kept me safe, I guess you could say. There's one of the things that I've never invited something into my home. I've never been to the point where I'm going to invite something into my home.
No.
I can handle things, but when I start putting my daughter's mentality and safety at risk, that's when I need to draw the line. If I was living alone, that's one thing. I can handle a spirit. I can handle something that's out there. But when I involve a child's life in that, that's when I'm at the point where I'm like, no, this isn't going to happen. This is going to be one of those things where you stay outside. I'll talk to you when I go outside. I'll communicate with you on an investigation or whatever, but you're not coming home with me. You're not going to be in my house. You're not going to be anywhere near something that can be a problem for my child. And so far, I mean, I've lived in this house since February, beginning of March, and I've never had an issue before. So, I mean, hopefully that, knock on wood, that stays that way.
Paranormal